to order this meeting of the Redevelopment Authority, and let the record show that we have a quorum. And first off, move to item 17 on the agenda, public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. Moving on to item 18 for possible action, approval of the minutes of February 19th, 2015.
I move to approve the minutes of the Carson City Redevelopment Authority for February 19th, 2015 as presented.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. On to item number 19. And Lee, are you going to take us through this?
Sure.
Oh, and before we get started, we have just some disclosures to read. I'll start. NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest. The matter before this board affects my commitment in a private capacity as an owner of a property in Redevelopment District 1. However, the resulting benefit or detriment accruing to me is not greater than that accruing to any other owner in the district. Additionally, in my official capacity, I'm required to participate in the formulation of redevelopment policies and procedures, and therefore, I conclude that the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in my situation would not be materially affected by this private commitment. And because this is not a clear case of disqualifying conflict of interest, I will be voting on this matter. And finally, Section 1.4 of the Redevelopment Authority Policies and Procedures requires me to make a written disclosure of this interest to be entered into the minutes, which I incorporated with this disclosure and have submitted a hard copy for the minutes.
I have the verbatim disclosure with the exception that the property that I own is in Redevelopment District 2, and we will enter these for the record.
Any other disclosures? All right, Lee.
Thank you. Good afternoon. For the record, Lee Plemel, Community Development Director. This item is action to amend the Carson City Redevelopment Authority Policies and Procedures, Section 3.2, relating to financial assistance for special events, by amending it to direct certain arts and cultural related special event applications to the Cultural Commission for review and recommendations. And specifically, as we have discussed at the last meeting, you may remember this being before you for some discussion. This would send a portion of the applications that are submitted to the Cultural Commission. The remainder would continue to go to the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee. The amended policy went to RAC, the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee on April 6th, and they unanimously, by a 6-0 vote, recommended approval of the modifications as are in your packet to the policies. The modifications begin on page 16 of 27 of the policy document in there. Just real quickly, they did make some little technical corrections from what you saw previously, so I just want to point that out. On the very bottom of page 16 of 27, you'll see where they changed a may to shall, and that is now says if an application is deemed to be incomplete, it shall lose its eligibility for consideration. That was a recommendation of RAC. They did recommend, as was suggested by the board, that 40% of the total amount of redevelopment funding allocated to special events each year would go to the arts and cultural special events. And then in the second to last paragraph on page 17, there were just some technical corrections made to the timing within 30 days after the filing deadline for the application, rather than the receipt of the application, recognizing that applications may be filed at earlier at different times during the year. So that was just a little clarification. But in essence, it's the policy you had some discussion on before. We received applications. The deadline was yesterday. So with the implementation of this policy, we'd be forwarding the arts and cultural related applications to the Cultural Commission. Roger Mullendorf here is here from the Parks and Recreation Department. If you have any questions regarding the Cultural Commission aspect of the review, and I'll be happy to answer any questions with that.
Thank you, Lee. With that, I'll open it to the board for discussion. Any public comment on this issue? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
I move to amend the Carson City Redevelopment Authority Policies and Procedures, Section 3.2, Financial Assistance for Special Events, by amending subsection 3.21, Application Process, to direct certain arts and culture-related special event applications to the Cultural Commission for review and recommendations.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 20, any other further public comment? Seeing none, then I'd like to pass the gavel over to the mayor and adjourn as the Redevelopment Authority.
We're going to reconvene as the Board of Supervisors. Will take up item number 23, City Manager. This is to possibly ratify the approval of bills and other requests for payments by the City Manager. We have the packet of information that we usually get with this item. Any public comment on this issue? Board comment? Anybody? Motion's in order.
Okay. I move to ratify the approval of bills and other requests for payments by the City Manager for the period of March 10th, 2015 through April 6th, 2015.
Second.
On the motion, discussion, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Thank you. Let's take up non-action items, legislative matters. Mr. City Manager, you want to take us where you think we are?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, as you know, we've passed the deadline for all bills to have been passed by the first House. They're now, any bill that is still alive is now working in the second House, and we're coming up on the next couple of deadlines. What I'd like to do is provide an update for the bills that are still alive, that we're tracking, that have relevance to Carson City. I'm going to go through all the Assembly bills first and then the Senate bills. Before I start, our last meeting, we took up the ward voting bill. There's both an Assembly and a Senate version of that. Both versions of that bill did not pass committee nor the House. So the ward voting bills are at this point dead. I'm going to go over a couple of the other bills that we did consider, as well as every other bill that I think is relevant to the city. AB 10, that's the NACO Indigent Defense Bill. It reverses responsibility for capital crimes from the county to the state. We support that. That's currently, it passed the Senate. It's being heard in Ways and Means right now. AB 19, that changes the budget public hearing. Right now, we're required to do it by the third Monday in May. This bill will change it to not earlier than the third Monday in May and not later than the last day in May. So in effect, the last 2 weeks of May, we have to hold a public hearing on our budget. AB 25, residential construction tax. This would allow cities and counties to apply the proceeds from that tax to new or existing parks. So it would be a change. We support that bill. AB 41, this did pass the Assembly. This prevented the state from taking any monies that the counties currently get in support of indigent services. AB 106, personally, I believe this is a bad bill. This is the design professionals bill. What it does is transfer liability from the design professional, that would be an engineer or an architect, to, in this case, in our case, it would be the city. The design professional would not bear the costs of defending the city against any damages or litigation coming out of negligent design or negligent work. AB 163 doesn't really apply to us, more of our surrounding counties. That's a rangeland fire. That's still alive. AB 170, that is a bonding bill. Initially, it had required cities or counties under 100,000 to put any bond greater than $2.5 million to the vote of the people. That bill has been amended, and it has since passed in its amended format, and it removed that one restriction or that one requirement, so we support that bill. There's a number of collective bargaining bills. AB 182, AB 249, as well as Senate Bill 168. AB 182 is still alive. The city did not support that bill. That would have eliminated mandatory arbitration in the case of an impasse. It would have also had additional measures. We supported AB 249 and Senate Bill 168. They were more common sense fiscal bills that just allowed the city to have additional funds and fund balance. We were able to increase our fund balance from 1 month to 3 months. It also put emergency reopener language in it in the event of fiscal emergencies. It's similar to what Carson City has already in our collective bargaining agreements. So we're tracking all those collective bargaining bills as they continue to move. AB 209, regional mental health, we support that. That has passed. AB 332, this is another bill that I think is a bad bill. It would require any public works project, any supply, I should be specific, any supplies bought for a public works project to pay the required county and state sales tax. Unfortunately, that bill has gone to the Senate. We're going to get another bite at the apple, so to speak, in an attempt to modify it. Talking with our lobbyist, I think we do have a good chance in getting that bill modified, but right now we think that's a bad bill. AB 366 would expand what cities and counties can do with gas tax. It would allow us to use that to maintain right-of-ways, not just arterials and neighborhood roads and highways. AB 377, I brought that to this board for your consideration. You supported it. That's the state prison bill. That's passed the Assembly. It's now under consideration in the Senate, and we expect it's going to pass the Senate. Again, that's an enabling bill. There's no funds attached to it, but it's an important first step for us as we look at potential uses for the state prison. AB 401, courts of inquiry. We had been tracking it for both the DA and for the courts here. That bill looks like it's probably going to die, so we're going to continue to track that. SB 11, SB 29. SB 11 is dead. That was the original NACO home rule bill. So all of the support now is on SB 29. That's continuing to move forward. Again, that would be functional home rule, and I think I talked about what that meant in a previous meeting. SB 16 is another NACO bill. This is a good bill for pre-sentencing. This would switch the burden from the state or from the county to the state. Currently, we split that. The state pays 30%, we pay 70%. This bill would flip those percentages, so we would pay 30, the state would pay 70. As we've talked about before, I think we're going to end up with a 50-50 split, but it's better than 50 is better than 70, so we'll take that. SB 30, that was the NACO longevity bill. We supported that. It passed. It's under consideration. I think it's at Ways and Means in the Assembly. SB 59, that was the Secretary of State sponsored business portal bill. We were successful in getting the language amended. It is now an enabling only bill. It doesn't require the counties. I mean, it's not a bad idea, but it would certainly cost us. I think we had put a fiscal note on it. So it's an enabling bill, and it's not a mandatory requirement for counties. SB 95, that would have required a hard copy publication of all the tax rolls. I think most of the counties and the cities were opposed to this. We settled on a compromise that we have to publish the tax rolls on our website. That bill has passed and it's continuing. SB 108, there's a couple of prevailing wage bills. This is one of them. This is Senator Settlemeyer's bill. This would raise the current floor on prevailing wage jobs from $100,000. Anything more than $100,000 has to go out to bid as a prevailing wage project. This would raise that to $1 million. That bill has passed and is continuing. Senate Bill 146. This was the so-called sleeping bill. Most of the counties and cities were opposed to this one as well. We were able to get a carve-out so that it does not apply to firefighters or other public service personnel or public safety personnel. SB 153. This bill we're tracking, it doesn't look like it's going to, it would remove the presumptive eligibility for heart-lung. As you know, the public safety employees, firefighters, sheriff's deputies are eligible for a heart-lung benefit. If at any time, there's no there's no time limit on it. So if any of them develop some type of a qualifying condition, it's presumed to be a result of their service as a firefighter or a sheriff's deputy. We've actually had at least one that I know of, one of our former firefighters who was covered under this provision, had a very serious cancer that was in fact tied to his service as a firefighter. But we do think there's probably some common sense reforms that could take place that would remove it, either the lifetime benefit. We were pushing to get it just to Medicare eligibility. So I'm not sure where this bill is going to go, but right now that presumptive eligibility is still in there. So we'll track it, but that bill is continuing to move along. SB 158 requires us to publish the full text of our collective bargaining agreements after it's been ratified by the Employee Association. Before I bring it to you, we've got to put it on our website and we have to post it 3 business days prior to your consideration of that collective bargaining bill. SB 476 established conservation districts. That bill passed. SB 481 it related to public utilities. Right now that is passed. That's on its way over to the Assembly. AB, I'm sorry to jump back to the ABs, but I got out of sequence when I was making my notes. AB 353, that would require public entities to basically bid for everything, whether it's a professional service. There's no bottom limits. That bill is continuing. We had submitted an amendment to it, so we're going to continue to track that bill. AB 172, sponsored by our local member of the Assembly, P.K. O'Neill. This is another prevailing wage bill. This would raise, instead of from $100,000 to $1 million under the Senator Settlemeyer bill, this would raise it from $100,000 to $5 million. So where this ends, I don't know. There's a big effort to make that particular bill go from $100,000 to $350,000. So I don't know where these prevailing wage bills are going, but we're going to continue to watch it. And I know this isn't the right one, and I apologize. I'll have to get the correct bill. But the fuel tax indexing bill is continuing to move forward. I apologize. I know I'm looking at the nomenclature. I know that's not the correct bill that I'd written down. That's continuing to move forward. So we'd expect to see if that Assembly bill clears the Senate, that there would be a measure on the 2016 ballot, county by county vote on whether or not to index the fuel tax to keep pace with inflation. So I apologize for not having our written report, but I'm still waiting to receive it from our lobbyist. As soon as I do, I will forward that to you via email. Pending any questions or comments, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my update.
I just have a general question. Did you listen to the testimony on AB 332 of why would they want to have us pay sales tax on everything we're doing on a project? when they're going to raise the limits on prevailing wage, which is
Sure.
to save money so you can do more projects, why do they want to now put sales tax in?
Well, and I don't know if Darren Schultz was there for that particular bill or
Just
not.
interested in-
I was not, I did not go to testify for that one. They're looking for more revenue is bottom line.
For who?
Yeah, for the state. State's looking for more revenue.
Oh, so it's there, but it's going to be the whole tax, the whole 7.6%,
Yeah, that's right.
not just the
Exactly.
state share.
That's right.
Exactly.
Did
That's
we
right.
offer that as an amendment? Oh, sorry.
No, it's both the state and the county.
Yeah, because we'd be paying ourselves
Right.
and taking it from our capital, and so they're upset about the state 2% being.
Did you testify, Darren, on that one? You did.
On the timing of the budget bill, the one that now says from May 17th through the end of May, do we know whether that's effective on passage and approval? And if it is, do we have any idea that it might pass before the 17th coming up? Might give us some latitude if it is signed before then for our timing of that budget thing. But I think we're on track anyway, but I just want to know.
We're planning to do on May 7th, we're going to have a public hearing on our budget. I'll find out if it is effective upon passage, but we'll almost certainly have our public hearing done, provided the board accepts the budget. We'll have the budget hearing done, the public hearing done, certainly prior to that bill passing and it going to the governor for his signature.
Very good. Okay. Board members, future agenda items, any comments from the board?
Go ahead. It doesn't matter.
Go. Who's going first?
Go, Brett.
I think we've heard a lot of talk about updating CCMC 1718 today, so I'd like to have that come back to us. Even if, while it's fresh in our mind, we can make the changes that we discovered working through the Landscape Maintenance District petition. And then if we need to make additional changes after implementation of the first assessment period, then we can do that. But I do think that we should at least address the changes that we've come across so far so we don't forget them.
And then I would just like, not maybe future item for here, but I would like the residential construction tax agendized for the Parks and Rec Commission to look at the allocations, because that money's been there, I think I heard like up to 5 years it's been sitting there. So I think that item should go back to the Parks and Recs Board to determine if that should be reallocated and put the money to use. And so I'd like that too.
Jim?
Just want to give you an update. I did talk to Kevin Ray over at the Humane Society Animal Shelter. I specifically asked two things that I wanted to follow up, and he did respond, is the website does not show his name, the Humane Society. He can't do anything until October, he said. The second thing is the Oversight Committee. He does believe there's been a delay from the chairperson, and he's going to put something in the works and have that come forward as soon as possible. I also agree that the Municipal Code Title 17 should come to us as an agenda item. I would also say, if we can, possibly, I know you're running through the bills there, but if we could have that information prior to the board meeting, that would be helpful. It's hard to write all the notes down as you're saying things, and I think our lobbyists, paid lobbyists, should update us, which we're not getting. Also, if it's possible, maybe on our website, if you could put some information about a noise ordinance, if you have problems with noises, how the citizens can address that, who they can call. Sometimes it's the animal shelter if it's dogs, sometimes it's the sheriff's department. Also, maybe the mayor could, oh, that's the other thing. I've got to tell Roger that I did bring this up. Arbor Day run. So everyone's supposed to do this. I was told to tell everyone to do this, so I'm just following directions from my daughter. And the last thing is, maybe, Mayor, you could expand on this a little bit. The Carson Proud, what's going on there Monday?
I think Monday we'll just let happen on Monday. There'll be a meeting on Monday to talk about the launching of the Carson Proud initiative, and also to talk about some theming ideas for downtown. And Nick, you want to fill any more in on that?
I would, Mr. Mayor, just to segue in on the back of that. From 12:30, this is Monday, April 20th, here in the, actually, it's going to be out in the, is it going to be in the Sierra Room or out in the hallway?
Sierra Room
and the lobby. So Monday, May 20th, 12:30 to 2:30.
April 20th.
Did I say May? Thanks for catching. Let me start that all over again. Monday, April 20th, from 12:30 to 2:30, and from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. We're going to do a public theming workshop here in the community center, the Sierra Room, and the lobby. Part of that will also be the rollout of our hashtag Carson Proud campaign. So we encourage everyone to come. Give us input. We're looking to proceed. The next big milestone is going to be our 30% design. That's going to be June 22nd. That's when we expect to have our 30% design of the downtown corridor. So again, Monday, April 20th, 12:30, 2:30, and from 5:30 to 7:30 here in the community center.
Okay, and while we're talking about Supervisor Shirk's daughter telling me we should go run, you'll see in a new press release today from P.K. O'Neill challenging each of the other leaders in this community to help him fund the Always Lost Meditation on War exhibit. So
I've already done mine.
pay up and ante up. It's a good project. Okay, all right, go.
And I just want to mention that we've been contacted about our deer in our community, and so we're working forward on a public service announcement just on an educational piece, and so that'll be coming forward so that we educate the public on how to deal with it.
I was going to say, there were some good things that happened in the Visitors Bureau's last meeting. Maybe you could update the board and the public on that?
Well, in particular, I mean, we just went over our budget items specifically, but other than that, there was nothing out of the ordinary to
Well, I thought
discuss.
the MAC, the monthly,
That the interlocal agreement is just something that is ongoing, so that's nothing new.
but it was updated at the board at that meeting, correct? That they are going to have something once a month for sure.
Yes, but that was part of the initial agreement anyway.
I understand that. But they confirmed it. I don't care how you want to put it.
Yes.
That's good news, I thought. Is there any other committees that board members are sitting on that we could pass along information to the public?
Brad, let's go.
On RTC, I received an email while we were at lunch from Congressman Amadei's office informing us that he has co-sponsored a bill for the highway transportation funding bill to institute a federal gas indexing system. So I didn't get a chance to read the entire bill, but I will take a look at that, and that should be coming up soon.
Anything else? All right. And let me just ink in favor of the Arbor Day run. That's a good deal. So get out there and do that, and it's a fun time. All right. So let's now make sure I do this correctly. We're going to go to 25B. As everybody knows, we pulled 25A. So now we're on the presentation regarding a discussion on the presentation and discussion regarding the drought and drinking water supply. Darren, you ready to go, or you want me to set up, or who you got?
Mr. Mayor, if I could just,
Yeah.
I kind of want to set it up.
Set it up. Go
Just
ahead.
broadly here. You know, we kind of live in the Reno media market, and we've heard a lot of stories coming out from the Truckee Meadows district. They've instituted a voluntary 10% reduction. We all hear the absolutely apocalyptic stories coming out of California. So we have, you know, we're very cautiously optimistic here in Carson City. We have a completely different supply than Truckee Meadows, for example. We're keeping a close eye on our water supplies, especially the groundwater, the water we're pumping out of the wells. That's going to be more important to us this year than it has been in the past, as we expect all of our surface sources, the Carson River, Kings, Ash Canyon, and also the water that we're able to draw from the state, we're expecting to have much less of that this year. So we don't have enough water to waste, but Carson City is actually relatively fortunate when we compare ourselves certainly to both our regional neighbors here as well as to water districts in California. So with that, I've got Darren Schultz, the Public Works Director, as well as David Perchetta, and they're going to go through an informational update on where we are with drinking water, and we're going to end up talking about effluent and the situation that we expect to have during this season. So David or Darren, whoever wants to kick it off.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Darren Schultz, Public Works Director, for the record. Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of what Nick just said there. In this presentation, we intend this to be relatively brief and high level, but I also have a number of the staff here from our water division to answer any and every technical question that you might have. We want everybody to go away from here today feeling comfortable with our future and the way we're going about it. I do want to add at the beginning of this that the reason I feel like we're in exceptional shape compared to our neighbors is because of planning that started at least 30 years ago within this community in regards to our water system. So first here, we just have an overview of a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. And it starts out with because of the drought, our surface water supplies are going to be limited drastically. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation. So that forces us to use primarily groundwater. And with using primary groundwater, that causes some challenges. But like I say, we shift the way we do things, and we're prepared to meet those challenges. And then really the big thing that we're faced with this summer is our peak demands, and that's when everybody has everything turned on at the same time, and it's really, really hard. That's where our challenge is to supply that much water at one time. It's not that we don't have the water, it's a matter of mechanically supplying it that much at one time. So that's really, as we look forward into the summer, those are the things that we're really trying to hit off and have a plan for. Ultimately, as we talk about all this and get through it, our goal, and here today we're gonna present that we're encouraging voluntary reduction by 10%.
Can we ask questions as we go?
Sure.
Absolutely.
If you encourage the voluntary reduction by 10%, by our billing standards, when we reduce consumption, we still pay the same dollar amount, or does our bill go down?
Your bill will go down. Your bill, you have a base rate on your bill, but then anything above that base rate that you spend is additional charge that you have. So yes, if you reduce your consumption, but somewhere in that range, depending on which tier you're in, your water rate will go down. That's correct.
Your base rate stays the same.
That's
and
right.
It's leveled after that.
Right.
At this juncture. So if you decrease by 10% and you drop down below that first level and you're into the base, do you save money?
You will not save money, but the percentage of people that actual circumstance would affect is very, very small.
And 10% would it drop you from any tier group to another tier group at all?
It could, certainly.
And your rates would go down. So there is
That's right.
You could save.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
absolutely.
The public could know that.
Yes.
Thank you.
As Nick alluded to, in the news in the region, it seems like every time you turn on the news, it's drought, it's dry, there's cracked lake beds, river beds, etc. We know what's going on in California and also here in Nevada. It's important that this community knows that Eagle Valley, Carson City, we're not exempt, but it's very, very different than what you're hearing in California, what you're hearing in Southern Nevada, and even what you're hearing up in Washoe County. Our basin, our water supply, the way we pump, the way we deliver is very different than our neighbors, and so we have to look at it differently, and I'm going to try and explain that today. This is just a macro view of what our basin looks like. This is Carson Valley, Eagle Valley there up to the north. But the idea is that we're surrounded by mountain ranges of various levels. As precipitation comes down, as snow melts, it comes down into the basin and it infiltrates, and then it goes down below us into various levels of our basin that's beneath us. So on any given day, any given winter, the idea is between snowpack and rain, the precipitation goes down into the dirt, into the earth, down deep. We use our wells to pull that out. What's happening is, in addition to that, we've had groundwater, which is kind of the river to the south and the slopes to the east. And so we've depended on that groundwater too. So as we get further into the presentation, I'll kind of explain the difference. But this is just a big picture of how it works, how our basin, how we manage it, but also how we collect the water and then eventually extract it. Here's a picture of Carson City, just in general, and it's important to note that we've been, like I said, our plan has been in the works at least 30 years, but even as recent as today, with our work that's going out here in the park adjacent to us and building pipelines. But this gives you a kind of a big picture of our water supplies. We have our wells that are off on the east side there, the right side of the screen, that are mainly river wells, pulling water that's flowing in down underneath the river. In the middle of our city, we have just our standard wells. And then if you go over to the west side, we have wells over there, but then we also have catchments where we're getting water from the state water system as well as from Ash and Kings Canyon. I didn't mention in the previous slide, but what's important to note is because of the way our valley is situated, every drop of water that's saved in Carson City stays in Carson City. It's not that this water gets moved onto another community or into a different zone or a different basin. So what we're saving here is allowing us to use that water into the future. So it's very important that everybody knows that. That's not the case for all around us. This is just some general information on our water rights. We currently have over 18,000 acre feet. That allows us enough acre footage for build out of our community. We don't require development here to come and bring water rights with them. When they come to develop, we've already acquired those water rights as a city, so that's already obtained. Our problem isn't having enough water. Our problem may be getting the water out of the ground fast enough. But right now, we've been acquiring water rights over the last 30 years, and we're to a point now where projecting development out into the future, we're covered as far as water rights. The graph just gives you a little bit of idea of how those water rights are broken down between development and future and what we're using now.
So Darren, the green is what's available?
That's right.
We have the, okay.
That's correct. A little bit about our water sources here, between groundwater, surface water, and then our regional pipeline. Like I referred to, our rights are spread between the two, so we have plenty of rights on both sides. But currently, with the drought as it is in the river, very little water in the river, and also water off of the east slope, we're primarily using our groundwater rights. The thing that's changed with this graph, even since it was presented in 2011, is we bought additional rights down from the town of Minden, and that's where our regional pipeline, which is pumping that water from the south up to Carson City and ultimately through Carson City, really helps us out to get additional groundwater rights and groundwater through our system. The graph here on the right just tells you which basin our groundwater rights are held in. They're all around us. We pump from different basins into it, but it just gives you an idea that we don't have all our eggs in one basket. We've looked at this through the years and trying to develop a balanced plan. And then down at the bottom, this is just our surface water sources. Once again, they're spread out. We have multiple numbers of them. When things are wet and things are good, we use these rights, and a large percentage of our water comes from them. When things are they are currently, we depend very little on this and really go with the groundwater. This tells you by month just what an average, as far as the water that we're using, where that water is coming from. This was 2014, so it gives you a feel for things. As you can tell, in the winter months, the more wet months, and also the months where the demand is down, we use more surface water, which is a good thing, and try and recharge our groundwater sources. In the summer, June, July, and August are our busy months water-wise, and we're very dependent on our underwater sources. Carson River flows. This is a bleak picture, but I think everybody already knows what's going on here. The lines, the different color lines, represent the last 5 years, and just tells you what's going on with the flow in the Carson River. The thing to note is at the very bottom left, there's a dark red line that goes over to March. So that's this year, the Carson River flow. What we're seeing and what we're hearing from USGS, from the monitoring station, is that it's going to, that orange line that it's on right now, that's last year's. But what they're telling us is we're soon going to drop below that orange line for this year. So, and when I say soon, I mean like this week or next week. It's bleak. This is just some information that we wanted to show. We have wells all over town. We also have, wells that we pump. We also have monitoring wells, and we monitor every one. We keep track of the level of water that's in there, how well the pump is doing, how much water we're getting out of there, how deep the water is, etc. So we're trying to keep a really good handle as to how these wells are fluctuating over a given point in time, so that we can adjust our system and our pumping accordingly. Here we get into our conservation measures. This is not something that started today or is going to start today going forward, but this is stuff we've been working on for years and years. It's something that I just learned, and I got to say a lot of this went on before my time here, but I just learned that some of this, for instance, the watering restrictions, the every other day, Carson City was the first one in the state to do that. We were above Southern Nevada, that whole idea of water your lawn every other day and try to conserve. And the low flow toilets, Carson City was the first to adopt that in the state. So there's a lot of credit that needs to be given to the group that has managed this over the years to get to where we are today, because some of these things that they're big public outreach now to be doing, we've been doing for years, and it's been part of what we our standard operating procedures. Some of the things here, the watering restriction ordinance, I think you're all familiar with that. What's going to change when we run into these drought times is we're going to enforce those ordinance a little closer, watch things a little better. We're gonna be very responsive to water waste. I mean, that's part of what we got to do. We have growth management ordinance already in place. I already mentioned the low flow fixtures. We look ahead, our 5-year CIP, demand forecasting. We're always looking ahead to see what's coming down the road at us, so that we're prepared for what it is. Education program going out into the public. We'll be sending flyers and utility bills next month, putting all this information in there to try and bring as much education as we can to it. We get a call, somebody is either reporting their neighbor or themselves, they have questions or concerns. We go out, we meet with them to their face, we try and help them and walk through it. We had a call this week, and they were complaining about their neighbor and not doing it. We went out and met with them, met with the neighbor they were complaining about. Here it's a guy that he's incapacitated, and he can only be up for short periods of time. His water comes on, he has to get up and turn it off, and things hit him, and he's stuck. He's laying on his couch, he can't get up, he can't go shut that water off. So we gave him our number, we go out to his house and we turn that water off. That's the kind of thing, that's the kind of response we're doing. We're making an effort to make this work. We do appreciate the calls from residents when they see water waste that doesn't go over our head. I can assure you we respond to everyone. We may not get there that day, but we respond to everyone. I talked a little bit about our Water Watch enforcement program. These are the individuals we have that are just driving around our community. They're going to be at night too, so people that try and sneak and do it at night, we're going to catch you then. You got to water when you're supposed to water and as much as you're supposed to water. So we got to keep a watch on these things. Leak detection program. Here in Carson City, our loss across our system is less than 3%. That is phenomenal. If you go up to Truckee Meadows, they're closer to 10%. So we're not losing a lot of water in our system, and that's, once again, that's a lot of work I got to hand over to our crews and operations guys. Groundwater recharge program, the idea is when we have any excess water that we're not using, that people aren't drinking, we put it back down into our aquifer so that we can pump it out later. We're very, very aggressive in this, and we do it as much as we can. The groundwater recharge program it's based off of surface water, so at times like this, when we don't have any surface water, obviously we're not recharging. But in years where we have it in the winter, we're not using it, especially on the west side, we're putting that back down into aquifer so we can use it later. And then our tiered water rates, which Mr. Shirk already mentioned, but just the idea of trying to have people not spend excess water on their, and if they do, they're going to get charged for it. They're going to pay extra for it. We do have a conservation plan. It was adopted in 2011, and 2011. We do that every 5 years. We're required by the state to do that. So we're in the process now of doing a new plan for 2016. It's very, very timely. When we did the 2011 plan, we did not have the Minden water. We also didn't have the drought that we've had for the last 4 years. So that plan is obviously going to change. But that's, it covers everything from how we run our system to where we get our water to how water is expended, and also what we should be doing looking into the future. So we'll be working on the update of this plan here over the next 12 months or so, and it will incorporate all those things, but also the changes that we've had in the last 5 years. We have a water production plan. This is what I referred to a little bit earlier, max day demand versus supply. This is really, and I think everybody in this room has probably experienced this. Maybe it was, I think 3 years ago was the last time where in the middle of the day, the middle of the week, we cannot provide, the demand is 23 million gallons, and we did not have enough downtime where we could recharge our reservoirs, our tanks, to pump back out in the community. So we're always trying to balance that as close as we can. It would be great if we could get people to nobody turn their water on at the same time and balance it out over 24 hours or a week. We'd have no problem, but we all know that's not the way it works. And then our action plan, we have an action plan in place for drought or for when we're running out of water, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So right now we're in our stage 1 of the plan, and basically that's where we ask for our 10% reductions that were voluntary reductions. I want to add that part of that is we go out to the users, our big users, and talk to them specifically. Our in-house Parks and Recreation, we've been working with them the last 2 weeks, so they've already turned their controllers to 10% less. It's all automated. All they have to do is plug in that number. That's been done. So there's already 10% less water going on the grass, and it's all high tech these days. A computer tells you based on weather, wind, dew point, all that stuff. It tells you how much water to put on your grass for parks. It's not somebody going out there turning a switch on and off every 5 minutes. So all they have to do to override that is say whatever it tells them they should water based on weather, they override that and say 10% less. So that's already happened across the board in our parks. We've also contacted the school district. They're going to do the same thing. We also contacted state buildings and grounds, and they're going to do the same thing. So we've already stage 1. That's the type of thing we're doing, is trying to make that conservation effort. Stage 2 and stage 3, obviously if things get really, really bad, then we go to the next stages, and eventually, the next thing we'll do is we start drying up parks. We start, all that stuff that's non-essential. Some people it's essential, but for life is non-essential, that has to go away.
Darren, one of the areas where I think there's one of the areas of town is on water usage is the state property at the corner of 5th and Stewart. the old children's home place. And it seems as though every time we have a rain and the rain stops, those sprinklers go on. I don't know if they got a problem with their metering devices or what, but if they're listening, tell them to take a look at that. All right?
Well, if they're not listening, I will go tell them.
Thanks.
I'll say the mayor said so.
Right.
I'll get some ground with that.
Jim, sorry.
Darren, I think everything you presented here is very helpful and useful, and it's a great presentation. A couple of little things. Fire hydrant testing, is that in stage 1, stage 2, or stage 3?
Fire hydrant testing, we typically try and do in the spring of the year when we have, when our demand is not so high. I can assure you we will not be doing fire hydrant testing in June, July, and August because that's when we need it. But unfortunately, there's also the life safety side of things of fire hydrant testing as far as, that fire hydrant being live when we need it. But at critical times, max demand water, we're not going to be testing our fire hydrants.
I know you mentioned the parks and recs, watering, being able to cut down. And do they water, they don't water during the day. I've seen them on at 9, 10, 11 o'clock, as the mayor pointed out that this area over here is watered. The parks and recs are watering in the evening or late hours
That's
now?
correct. That's correct. Yes.
The downside for a citizen is if you want them to cut 10%, they have no idea, because they cannot know how much water flow they have coming in because you can't read your meters, unless I'm wrong. Can you read the meter in front of your house? Is there an accessible way? And if there is, that's something else should be put on our website, is how you read this meter and how you can monitor your own volume of water that you're using.
That's correct. It is difficult to read your meter. You can do it. You can get to it and do it. We don't recommend it, but it is difficult. But this 10% reduction, basically what we're asking people to do is not get high tech yet. But if you're taking a 10-minute shower, take a 9-minute shower. If your sprinkler setting says 10 minutes for your grass, turn it down to 9. Just those basic concepts of, hey, do I need to leave that water running, or can I shut it off in between moving this or moving the hose or that sort of thing? It's more, that's what we're looking at. Not exactly a 10% number, but just more of that awareness of, hey, I could cut back a little bit here. That's what we're asking for.
And that'll be in the flyer that you mentioned that'll be going out?
It will.
Just little ideas how you can cut it easily.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
I think the watchword, I've been mentioned up here, I think the watchword in all of this is prudence.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, from what you say, Darren and David, we have sufficient water. We have maybe some delivery issues that come with that, and hopefully this east-west transmission line is going to alleviate some of that probably when we get that one finished. But at the end of the day, we're asking for a voluntary reduction. And if, the idea there is not to penalize people, but to just say, let's just be cautious and be prudent about what's a valuable resource, and we're going to be fine in this little area.
That's correct.
So,
That's correct.
All right.
And I didn't say, I wanted to, when I opened it up, I wanted to say is every day, multiple times a day, you can read a different report about weather outlook and what's going to happen. And really, that's why we're optimistically cautious, because we don't, it's been 4 years, we don't know, what are we at the beginning or are we at the end? And no matter who you talk to, they have a different story. So we're just trying to plan as best as we can for where we're at right now and cautiously into the future. But like you say, we currently don't feel like we have a problem.
Well, I think the city manager was talking to me the other day. We're just casual conversation, it's not an alarmist thing to say, but you're right about where we are in this drought. Are we at the beginning, the end, or what happens, if this is extended, like not a year or 2 years, not 5 years, but maybe 10 or 20 years. We got to be prepared for those things going down the road. And I commend you guys. I commend the city manager and our staff for, taking that longer view of what possibly could happen here and being cautious about it, cautious about a resource. And I think you're right to say, right now we're cautiously optimistic. But again, the watchword is on the one hand prudence, and the other one is cautious. Okay? That's mine too. All right.
It's only fair, we're talking about water, is to give you an update a little bit about our wastewater supplementation of our the water that goes out to our golf courses and the prison farm. As you know, we've been here before you several times to give you a little update of what we're doing. Once again, this year, we will be augmenting with fresh water that effluent supply to try and help manage the demand for irrigation. What we've done is last year was a full year. The year before that was a partial year. We anticipate, obviously, this year to be a full year. And this is just some general information as to how much water we're spending, what it means in the big picture. There's several reasons. I'll touch them briefly as to why we're in this situation. Number one is water coming out the back end of typical homes has decreased dramatically. That has a lot to do with low flow. It also has to do with awareness. On one side, we don't want you to use a lot of water, but on the other side, if you don't use a lot of water, then it's not going into our treatment system. And so that's closed us down considerably. The other one is that when the freeway came through town, a lot of utility work was done, and because of that, new lines were built, and we have a lot less infiltration into our sewer lines, which is less water that we're treating that's coming out the back end. So overall, last year we were about 354 acre-feet short, and that's what we supplemented. If we look into the future with a 2% growth, meaning more water's coming into our treatment facility, more water's going out the back end to these reusers. So the best case scenario, it's about 4 or 5 years where we could be past this, depending if growth is only 5% and our water, continues to decline. It could take us as much as 36 years to get there. So there's the early, there's the end. Crystal ball we're going to be somewhere in the middle. It has a lot also to do with the drought, and wet years changes. Our reusers for irrigation, typically they turn their water on a little bit, maybe once in February, maybe a couple times in March, and then April they really hit it. This year they turn their water on in January. I mean, why not? People want to golf, the weather's warm, let's make it happen. So that really affects these numbers. It's hard for us to factor that in there. Other years there's been snow on the golf course, and obviously. So those kind of things, we play these number games, we do the best we can moving forward, but this just gives you a general idea of what we're looking at.
Can I ask a question, Jim?
Sure.
Sorry. On the reclaimed water, when there's a shortage and we're running low, you put fresh water to the golf courses and to the prisons.
That's right.
Correct? And what do they pay for the fresh water? If citizens are paying a high dollar amount per gallon, or however you want to look at it, what are they paying? Are they paying the same rates for fresh water as they are for reclaimed water? And if so, why?
Right now, there is no charge to the reusers for the effluent water, and there is also no charge to them for the freshwater supplementation that we've been doing. And that was based on direction that we've had in the past, where it was transferred from the sewer. It's a cost of treating the water, so the sewer fund transferred funds to the water fund to pay for that. Last year, it was about $80,000 is what that cost to do that.
So it is covered, in a sense, financially from the sewer. You transfer money from the sewer to the water for the amount of money, or for the amount of gallons that you use fresh water.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you had $8,000.
80.
80,000. Okay, I was going to say 8,000. I didn't think it sounded right. So how many gallons last year did we give fresh water to the golf course?
100 million.
100 million gallons. Mm-hmm. And that costs 80,000?
Right.
It's pretty cheap, isn't it? I don't know.
Well, yeah.
So what are they paying versus the citizens' up rates that we're paying? What are they paying? Is there any comparison?
There's no. They're not. These are our budget numbers. Is how it's how the money is split up and it's paid for. Maybe if I go through this, that will help that. Our sewer operating budget is just under $6 million. Gives you an idea there. The purple, salary and benefits. The red, services and supplies. And then if you go to the next slide, the upper right hand there, say that $100,000 is what the sewer budget is paying the water budget for that supplemental water. It just gives you an idea graphically of what we're talking about here. I mean, we can sit down and talk about the wheres and the whys, but basically $100,000 out of that budget, it didn't. We make that's a line item in our budget. We plan on it, and we make that transfer of the water. The bottom left here is that water, if we're 100 million gallons that go to those reusers. If you look at the big picture, the big pie there of how much water we produce in a year, that little number there, that's 3%. So 3% of our supply is going to the reusers. And then if you go to the one on the right, the bottom right, this one definitely has impact to us, and what I referred to as our max day supply. If we're trying to send out 22 million gallons, if we're also putting 1 million gallons out for that, I mean that's a percentage. That's 5% of what we're trying to do. So we do struggle a little bit with that one. Does that answer it?
Got all kinds of questions.
All right. All right. Figured we would.
Jim,
I'm still contemplating.
Okay.
all right. Well, Karen, then Lori, and then we'll see if we go back to Jim if he's done.
With all that said, Darren,
All right.
I had a constituent ask me if you know what the dollar sign is for the end product of what the prison produces from the effluent or whatever potable water that we send to them. Would it be cheaper? Would we save money if we just paid them for that end product and utilized the effluent ourselves?
That's a very good question. I don't have the dollar amount, but I know it would not be cheaper because that prison facility and the irrigation and the alfalfa, that is for their cows, and that's for milk for the whole prison system in Nevada. So that would be a lot of milk that we would be buying instead of giving them this effluent.
So we are taking money from the sewer account that all the ratepayers put into to do treatment of the sewer and transferring it to the water account. Is the amount that you're transferring from the sewer account consistent with the cost that was there originally to treat the effluent that you were giving to those entities? Is it an equal answer?
No, because originally that effluent, we were giving it, and we're still giving it away at no charge. So that there was no effect in our overall budget, but it came down to we're the cost of treating water. What does that cost? And that's where that $5.7 million, that's the overall cost of what we're doing to treat water in general. So what's happened now that we've done this supplementation is we made that now part of our budget. It wasn't part of our budget several years ago, but we've now, moving forward, have made that part of a budget. Our line item in there is that supplement of water, with the idea that if the reusers go away, the sewer fund would pay a big number trying to dispose of that effluent, which is a problem we don't have, but it's a problem we could have. So that would be the responsibility of the sewer fund is you treat the water, you get it to where you want to go. Now it's got to go somewhere. Right now, the golf courses are taking it, but if they weren't, then it would be our responsibility to figure out a way to pump it, to irrigate, to dispose of that water. That's a cost to the sewer fund. So that's how this nexus was made to where we got. But obviously you can look at it different ways.
And so then, if I'm in peak water usage, which is the time in which the golf courses operate, is in the peak water use, unless I'm missing something here, but somehow I'm betting during the summer is when they're golfing the most, and they're taking fresh water, is this working? Or are we going to get to a point if we don't have enough affluent that now I'm hurting the resident to be able to have enough water?
Well, as I showed you our overall picture, it's a minor amount, but yes, I mean, there is an impact there. Overall, it's minor, but there is definitely an impact there. Now, what's going to happen, what we think is going to happen, and letters are going to go out to our reusers within the next week, we're going to tell them that we are supplementing as we have in the past, but we can only supplement so much. We can't, they can't have as much as they want. We can't provide it. So we are supplementing, but our projections show right now that probably in August, we are going to run out of any excess effluent. So then the golf courses, it will happen what happened to them 2 years ago, where we can only give them as much water as we're producing out the back end of our plant, 4 million gallons a day. That's not enough to run all of our golf courses and the prison farm to their desires. So there's going to be some brown grass later this summer.
Question. Darren, with that said, since the dam is so low, and you've heard me say this before, have you looked at federal grants to try and get that repaired such that we have more effluent in times like this when we need it, and such that it could be naturally filtered and possibly sellable to some of our counties downstream?
I think that's a two-part question.
Yes.
The dam? Okay. I just want to make sure I understood. So the first question regarding the Brunswick Canyon Reservoir leaks. Anywhere, depends on, but anywhere from 10 to 20% of the water leaks through that reservoir. When they designed that, they knew that there would be some leakage. So then it's a matter of, well, what does it take to fix that? And it can be fixed. It's complicated and it's expensive. The first thing that we're being told you have to do is you would have to have an alternative temporary reservoir to store the water so you could drain that completely and go in and line it. The problem with building and permitting a new reservoir to do that for 1 year, it's a very expensive proposition. It's basically, you can't build a temporary one, you're basically building a permanent one because that's what they require, it's the standards. The other option to do is to try and go up within that reservoir and subdivide it with a cofferdam, or, and fix it piece by piece. That's an option, and we have our engineers starting to look at that to see what the possibilities are. The second part of your question is, because of the water that leaks out of the reservoir and down through the springs and into the river, that water is owned by Carson City. But it's a secondary right. That water is secondary. It's not primary because it's already been used once. So the state considers it a secondary right. So to transfer a secondary right back into our valley as a primary right is very cumbersome and difficult, and we don't know if it's possible. But we're also looking into that. Furthermore, the river is broken up into segments based on the watersheds that I explained to you. That water is going into the segment that's down below Carson City. It's not, if we were introducing that water in the river up above Carson City and then we pulled it out of the river down below, still in Carson City, that would be a lot cleaner than one segment down below us. So in talking with our engineers, it's not, they haven't said it's impossible, but they said we have a long road in front of us, but I said we need to explore that road, so we are.
Thank you.
Done contemplating. Real quick, when the charts on the screen look great, but when we get them, you can't figure any of this out because the color codes are all the same.
Okay.
I mean, I know I'm nitpicking here, but I think just numbers and something's great, but when you put it in a pie chart, you can't equate the numbers to the right-hand side what it means in black and white. It just doesn't make sense. I don't see it in this packet. I know this is discussion only, but we're talking about the affluent water, and it seems like we're going to be in the same position we were. We're running out of affluent water, and I don't know if you can come back to the board, or if you can email us, or however, but I think it's still pertinent that we have a conversation about affluent water, who gets what, how we do it, and what happens if it doesn't. I don't see any charts in here, and I know we've had the discussion before, and I hate to labor on it, but we're going to be right back in the same boat where we're going to be running into the problems, and there's a prison and 3 golf courses that take our affluent water, and we're going to be right back in the same position we were a couple of years ago, and we're not doing anything different, and all we're doing is giving them fresh water, and we raise the rates of citizens astronomically to take fresh water, and we're giving fresh water away at a reduced rate. However you want to put it, I think you get what I'm trying to say, but we're not doing anything different.
Well, if you remember, though, the direction that we got from this board a year ago was to continue supplementing as we were, and the sewer fund reimbursing the water fund. So that's what we're doing moving forward. Now, it's difficult. I showed you the numbers, the years. It's difficult for me to try and develop a long-term plan when I don't know exactly, what that plan will be. So
maybe then what the discussion is, we're doing what you were directed to do from this board. I understand that. I don't think that's a great direction. I don't think that's the way we should proceed forward. Maybe we need to have an agenda item where we come or you have it at your department and come to us with some other mechanisms that would help suffice this shortage, because I don't think it's going to get better in the years ahead. Maybe I'm wrong, but according to the governor, it doesn't look promising. So we need to look at other options rather than just doing the same thing we did yesterday, even though we gave you the directions. I get that. But we need to do something different, maybe.
Darren, is it possible to use storage tanks or tanks for storage for the effluent water? So in other words, going back to Karen's comments about trying to come up with a solution to fix Brunswick, is it possible to build a storage tank up there to store additional effluent water?
Yeah, storage tanks are possible, but they're very, very, it'd be cost prohibitive for the amount of water that we're talking about. I mean, the tanks that you see around town here, they're a couple million gallons of water, between 1 and 2 million gallons of water, and that costs you just under $1 million to build. I mean, we'd need a lot of big tanks, and it's got to be more of a reservoir type of facility.
Yeah, I was thinking to supplement the reservoir, because the more full the reservoir is, the faster it leaks.
Right.
So it seems like there's a balancing point to where we could put excess effluent in the tanks and keep the reservoir at a somewhat lower level, and then fill the reservoir from those tanks. And, I'm not an engineer. I'm just throwing the idea on the table, and that's for you guys to figure out if it's a smart thing or not.
Okay. Like I say, and I appreciate that feedback, we do have our professionals looking at it and trying to come up with some options into the future so that we're as prepared as we can be, and everything's on the table.
Sticking on the affluent water, if I just use a prison as an example, and let's say they're supposed to get 100 gallons per month, per year, or per season, and we're running low, and we ask them to cut back 10%, is our contract, do we have to honor the contract that says they get 100 gallons, what is it, day, month, or whatever? Why do they need to cut back if they have a contract that says they get X amount of gallons?
Well, the reason is, that contract says they get X amount of gallons, but only if we can produce X amount of gallons. I mean, if we can't produce it, we obviously can't, then that contract's null and void. And that's how we're looking at it, is if we can't produce it, you obviously can't have it. So.
Okay. There is, I don't remember the contract, but there's something written in there that says if we can't produce it at some measure of supply, then you must cut back. You being the prison, as an example.
Well, the DA spent many hours on these contracts, so I don't want to put words in their mouth, but it's an understanding that, yes, this is a commodity that we will provide to you within this contract at these limits, but with the understanding is if we can't produce it, we're not going to provide it to you. That's a given, kind of a give and take within the contract. And
Well, it's priority of use, because we got 4 contracts out there.
yes, that too.
So, I mean, that's how, I mean, you address it. I mean, if there's a shortage, it's just like water law in Nevada. If there's a shortage, the senior guys get the water and the junior guys suck it up.
That's right.
Until, so I think in the past what you've done is you've kind of made a solemn decision with our users and said, instead of doing it by priority use, we're going to do an across-the-board cut for everybody so everybody shares the pain. But if you get right down to it, and the DA can weigh in on the contracts, if you get right down to it, there's a priority of use in those contracts that says, Prison Farm is number 1, Dwight's place back there is number 2, Eagle Valley's number 3, and Silver Oak's 4.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, is that right?
That's correct. That's exactly correct, yes. But we do, when we had the restrictions 2 years ago, we did it, as you said, rather than all the water go one way, we tried to balance it so everybody felt a little pain and everybody could stay green and stay open for the most part. But you're right, it is based on priority, and Prison Farms has the number 1 priority.
And on the water rates, do you know how the water rates compare here with, say, Douglas County or Reno? Can you make a comparison or not?
Sure, we're cheaper considerably.
Well, Jim used the word astronomical increase in water rates. Well, I want to make sure from my own mind that what we're doing is we're taking this in context about what we're talking about here. So, as I see it, the water rates, they went up for a reason, and I think we've talked about that earlier today, at least when we did during the treasurer interviews. But at some point, when we had this before us last time, there's a judgment call on one, who do we do the strict legal thing by priority? Do we do it across the board? And I know you folks are looking at all the alternatives out there, at least I hope you are, looking at all the alternatives we can to solve the effluent issue out there. But at some point in time, we have to keep in mind that the golf courses are a source of economic activity in our town, which in turn pays for part of the water plant, the sewer plant we're doing. So I mean, it's a connection, but enough of that. But let me ask you, when we're talking about rates, tell me how you calculate the $100,000. What do you use to make that calculation?
That was directly off of the amount of money that we did for supplemental, the $100,000. That was directly off of the water that we're buying from Minden at the Minden rate. And since that pipeline goes right by where the water goes introduced into our system, we just use that rate. The cost of producing water around Carson City varies tremendously depending on the well, depending on if it's coming from Marlette. We blend it all together, obviously, and that's how we figure out the rate that we pay, that the general consumer pays. But that supplemental water, we use that what we're paying Douglas County for that water. That's the number we used.
Just for educational purposes, could that be a marginal rate, or is that just a rate that if you understand what I mean by a marginal rate?
Yeah. I think you could, well, I'm not sure I'm prepared to answer that. I mean, that rate that we're paying them it's got other things in it, and it's not.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple other questions. One, the Utility Oversight Committee, have they undertaken this issue if they had a discussion about use of potable water for golf courses?
Yes, they have.
And second, what is the linkage, if there is a linkage, between the east-west transmission line which showed us and our ability to deliver water?
Well, yes, maybe I didn't spend enough time on that. That east-west, obviously it started north-south and now it's going east-west. The goal with that is to be able to move water around our city. So once our surface water dries up and we depend greatly on water down below, we need to, would you go back to that slide, please? We need to be able to move water to different sides of the city. For instance, on the west side, we have water wells that are, affected by uranium. So by being able to move water from this pipeline to the west side, we can pump those wells more because we don't have to worry about that uranium level because we're blending it with this water that's coming through here. On the other hand, on the east side, we might have some arsenic wells. Once again, this allows us to blend that water through our system. The other advantage it gives us is that, it wasn't that long ago that during the winter, Quill up on the west side provided all of the water for the entire city. We didn't turn on any pumps. That's where we got it all. So it really has a lot to do based on weather, but with this pipeline, we can move things around and it will help us tremendously. Unfortunately, we're getting it chunk by chunk over to the west side. We really need it there today, but we're doing a piece every year. It's what's built into our rates, and we're eventually getting there. So.
And one last comment or question. We talked earlier about if you have a volunteer, if you conserve and you drop your consumption by 10%, you will drop your rate because of the rate design. But over time, fixed costs don't change. So, I don't want to make any mistake by saying that, today, if you conserve today, yeah, you're going to get a reduction, but if it continues on like that and there's a less commodity side, variable cost to use to cover the fixed, then somewhere there has to be an increase in rates in order to cover the fixed costs because they haven't changed. And so, it's not... I don't want anybody out there to think that people should be conserving, and there's no doubt that we need to do that. We need to do that, and we should do that from a prudent standpoint. And personally, I think that 10% is a good aspirational goal. Pretty easy to do, like you just said. If you take a shower for 10 minutes, make it 9, whatever. But at the end of the day, we also have to keep in mind that if this drought continues, our fixed costs don't go down.
That's absolutely correct.
All right.
They go up.
Okay. All right. I don't mean, I think that people need to understand the whole cycle of what can happen here. All right. Didn't mean to go Econ 101 again. Okay. Anybody else out there, public, want to address? And this time, I think if you have questions, please come up and we'll address them to the staff. So, or us, depending on where you want to go. Mr. Millard, how you doing?
Good, thank you. For the record, Dwight Millard, I just have 2 questions. One is on the 18,292 acre feet. If we could look at that chart. What is the 5,305, just what's remaining? Because the red shows is allocated for future development. What would the green be?
David Bricketta, Utility Manager, for the record. So this was a PowerPoint put together for our Growth Management Commission. And basically what it shows is what our projected use is for 2015. That's the blue. It's a little over 11,000 acre feet. The 7%, 2,300 is the allocation for development, and the other is the remaining, what's outside of that.
When you say allocated for development, is that build out? What I'm not understanding your slide.
We'll bring up Danny Rotter. He'll answer it.
Let the young guys answer this thing, huh?
Danny Rotter, Engineering Manager, for the record. That's when a development comes in, like Shoals Ranch, when we give them a will serve letter, the state engineer holds that and says you must allocate this much of your water rights for development. So, for instance, the vacant lots in Lakeview have a certain water right allocated to them. So when we go to the state engineer, and this is back to the 30 years ago and working through and gaining rights and working with the state engineer, because that was at one time was a moratorium on growth. And so there was things put into place so that when you come in and you say, I have 100 units I want to build, we block that out. And so that's the 1,300 acre feet that's blocked out. And it's roughly about 1,200 units across the various developable parcels.
Okay, so let me rephrase it. The 1,300 acre feet is what has been committed and has to be allocated for future growth. That's already on the books. You've already signed will serve letters, and that's for whatever's there.
That's
the
correct.
5,305 acre feet is what's available to go to build out.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Then my next question would be if you could go to the prior slide, or one of them, the one that shows the acre feet. It showed 18,292 acre feet.
It's at the top.
No, the one that said we had so much, wasn't there a chart in here that said where those water rights were located? Washoe Valley. That one right there, for example. That one, water rights, groundwater sources, you got 25% in Carson Valley. Is that water available to be piped through the new line, or do you have to get it into the system another way?
So that Carson Valley right is either, we have one well in Carson Valley that's a city-owned well that's can be tied to that line, and then the rest of it is Minden water that can. Actually, this was from the 2011 report.
Right.
So there's even more than that amount that we've purchased in the last 3 years that's from the Minden right. So most of that Carson Valley can go into the north-south transmission main and then the east-west.
Okay, well, there's some in Washoe Valley. I'm just going back, I'm an old guy, so the mind is kind of weak, but I kind of remember we always had problems with Washoe Valley and Carson Valley water rights and being able to use them here. And my concern is if we show 18,292 acre feet of water, which is good, and I know we bought a lot, how much of those are not ever really usable? I mean, someday they'll be usable because the state water engineer will die. That's kind of what's happened when we've changed where we're at today. Water engineers have gone away, their philosophies have been changed. But my question is, and it's just a question of how many of those are not usable. So that's one question.
Darren, correct me if I'm right, but, and maybe Kurt can chime in too, but all of our Carson Valley rights we used this last year. Through the regional efforts with Minden, Douglas County, and Indian Hills, a lot of those barriers have been broken down with the state engineer's office, and our water rights consultant has done a great job with managing those and allowing us to use them. And so we've utilized those Carson Valley rights to their full extent.
Okay, thank you, because that was kind of my basic question, because I know in the past the state water engineer refused to let us transfer. My second question is, I really am curious as how much money, I've heard 3 answers today and none of them was a number, of how much the wastewater treatment plant pays to the water department for the water they get. I've heard it's the rate that we pay.
$80,000 was last year.
I understand. How much per thousand? Yeah, it's $80,000. I heard that, but I don't know how much that included. Then I heard that we paid the rate that we pay for the water out of the pipeline. So the question is, what is that number?
67 cents.
Okay, that's my question.
Okay.
Thank you. That's 67 cents per thousand, and that's probably the cheapest water we have.
That's correct.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Come on up.
There? Oh, can you hear me now?
Tommy, good to see you.
I can hear me too.
You can hear. We can hear you.
This is good. I've lived in northern Nevada since '62 and in Carson since 75.
She didn't get your name, sir.
Oh, my name is Tommy Hughes, or T-Dog, if you're a teenager. And everyone I talk to says, my gosh, we need rain. This is the driest winter I can ever recall. And then on Sunday, April the 5th, I picked up my Nevada appeal, and it said, not dire straits for Carson, comma, yet. Now, I don't know what that word yet means to you, but there's an anticipation of something that's coming, and I've heard a lot today about paying for water. But what if there's no water to pay for? I've heard, and I kind of believe it's true, that drinkable water is our most precious resource. And if we don't have it, we don't live very long. And the way the West is drying up, you know, we're going to be a ghost town if we don't get water. And I'm talking, and I hear about voluntary conservation and everything, and that's fine. But I think it has to be mandatory conservation. Because when it comes to seeing my neighbor with green lawns or having a glass of water to drink, just guess which one I'm going to opt for. And from this article written by a very dapper young journalist whose name I won't mention because I can't, but his initials are John. Oh, JB. This is and Ed James. This is the driest winter and runoff on record. And I don't care. I'm not talking about, you know. I bought a T-shirt one time at Eagle Valley that said that only when the last river is dammed, only when the last tree is cut down, and the last bit of land is paved over, will man realize that you can't eat money. So, you know, I mean, really, I think there should be some stringent, I think people should not be allowed to water 3 days a week. I should think it would be down to 2 days a week. I think it should start in May rather than, and go to October rather than starting now. My grass is green and I haven't put a drop of water on it. So, I mean, it's a matter of priorities to me. I mean, what do you want to? Do you want to see your neighbor with a green lawn, or do you want water to drink?
Well, Tommy, I think you raised a point. I think that if I might just weigh in just a little bit here on it, you know, from my take of what's going on here is that, you know, you mentioned runoff. Well, our system here depends on both runoff and groundwater. And what we're being told here today is that, you know, runoff, as you mentioned, is probably not in the cards this year. I mean, or it's very little runoff. But that we have sufficient groundwater rights, groundwater available to us to manage the demand that we have here today. The effluent issues, we've got that around there, but we have sufficient groundwater that'll allow us to essentially kind of maintain the quality of life and the quality of living we've had. Now, that's a caveat, and that's why I think we mentioned the word prudence earlier on, because you're absolutely right. What happens if we are in extended drought? We have to be prepared for that, because at some point in time, if you run out of water, you run out of ability to have people. Now, hopefully, that's an apocalyptic view, but I think that we have to look at what we have, and I know that the staff here, with the direction of the city manager, has directed that what we do, we make sure that we have a very good handle on. That we've mapped and surveyed all of our groundwater so that we know almost exactly what we've got in terms of groundwater, so that we can monitor what the recharge rate is. I mean, if we're using it, how quickly, or if at all, is it being come back, or if it's not coming back, how quickly is it going down? How long can that last? And are we having enough people go around to tell people, let's abide by the ordinance and do a voluntary cut now? Because if that doesn't work, and we'll have the trigger mechanisms in there to see if we see the groundwater going down, not getting recharged, and we can't deal with it, and the risk is too great, then we're going to, at least my own opinion is, we're going to go mandatory, and we're going to put in the stiffer penalties. But for right now, we want to see, if we can have our community be cautious and be prudent about the use of water. And we'll be watching it daily, I can assure you, watching it daily about what water we use and what water we have to spend, because you're right. At the end of the day, if you don't have water, you don't have people.
You don't have life. You
don't have life. So, and I appreciate your comments and bringing us back down to, off the 30,000-foot level, back down to between a glass of wine and a glass of water and a lawn. So.
Well, wine gives you a better feeling, but
you need water, though. You need water, maybe.
But we need water. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, Tommy.
Okay.
It's good to see you, man.
Thank you, Mayor Kroll.
Okay. For number 2 times.
Yeah.
It's a good thing you're old.
May I just add one comment?
Sure.
I was here when we had some moratoriums, and I think Dorothy Palmer put us on the right road. I would just like to say that by attending today's meeting, I feel very comfortable with our city staff that has taken over that direction that she set some years ago, and I feel much more comfortable that they have a handle on it. And I think that's what's important. When you read the paper, it's kind of scary. It's kind of like, why are we so much better than everybody else? But I think they're as nervous, and I think they are very competent to handle the issues that's on the table today.
Well, I
just wanted to say that.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because Darren mentioned it a little bit. It's the decisions that were made by Dorothy in particular, but the staff back then. Dorothy was, kind of the genesis of all that, where, we're now sitting on 18,000 acre feet of water plus groundwater, most of it groundwater, and being able to say, what, we can be cautiously optimistic as, in this valley, as opposed to what's going to happen to the north of us here. And so, hats off, as you said, to, and I know you were involved in those discussions as well back in those days as well. So hats off to those who had the foresight to do what they're doing, because it's allowing us to have this discussion here today and hopefully being able to have a quality of life that we want to enjoy around here. So.
Well, in the 70s, there were many years that there were budgets set up to drill wells that never got drilled, and when Dorothy got here, she really had a mess. But it's obvious and evident that this staff has continued forward and spent the money and has kept their thumb on the water situation, and I think it's something that we as citizens can rest a little more assured about and be proud of.
Thanks, Dwight. Thanks. Okay, other public comment? Tommy, come on up.
Some permanent chairs there.
18,000 acre feet of groundwater.
Total water. Total water.
Total water. That's what we have right now.
18. That's what we have water. That's what we have permitted from the state engineer. 18,282 acre feet.
For
Carson Valley, our Eagle Valley, right here, Carson.
And that will last us for how long?
Well, that's the permitted amount, Tommy. I mean, so, I mean, what we can tell you is how much will an acre feet of water serve in terms of households, but how long that will last, I mean, that's one of the things we're going to be looking at in terms of, we think we know what's underground, but we're going to be more definitive about it. So we'll be able to tell you a little bit more after we do that. But again, the 18,282 acre feet is permitted water. Doesn't necessarily say how much water is there. Should, but it doesn't necessarily.
Okay, so so how much water is there that we can draw from? If we're permitted,
the state engineer believes that there's 18,282 acre feet of water. That's what the state engineer believes. That's what we've been permitted to have. But those were based on times that I don't know if they predicted a long-term period of drought or not. But according to the state engineer, there's 18,282 acre feet of water for use.
Right now?
Right now. City manager. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, Tommy, I just want to clarify that number, that 18,282, is what we're authorized to draw every year. Now, you see where we're only using about almost 12,000 acre feet. So we have more water rights than we currently use. That doesn't mean that's all the water that's in the ground. Some of those aquifers have built over hundreds, even thousands of years. The water is built up in there, and that's what we're endeavoring to find out and get a good estimation on how much water is in the ground.
I understand that there's quite a large aquifer in Douglas County. I've heard that, but you know, eventually, if you keep using and using and using and using, just like there's no end to, and we continue in drought, and I think someone, and maybe Ed James, said that we don't know whether this is the fourth year of a 4-year drought or the fourth year of a 20-year drought. And my understanding is that, you know, in order for there to be water in the ground, there has to be rain from the sky and snow melt and all. I mean, that's, I'm not a water engineer or anything, but if we have, I think, you know, Mayor Kroll, you said prudence. I think everyone should think conservation. I was in Uncle Sammy's yacht club from 65 to 67 in the Gulf of Tonkin, and we took very limited showers because when you've got cold salt water on you, and I think, and I do it to this day, and I don't know why everybody can't
take a Navy shower.
Take a Navy, yeah, that's the word.
Tell that to the Marines.
Oh, that was low.
That's okay. I'm kidding. We kid a little bit. But Tommy, I think that, you know, when there was a book that was kind of required reading when I went on the Colorado River Commission. It's called Cadillac Desert. I think it behooves a lot of people to read that.
Cadillac Desert. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
I'll order it. Okay. Thank you.
All right. All right. Anybody else?
Bob?
Yes, ma'am.
Could I ask Ed to come up just to talk about something he spoke about last night? Ed, would you mind coming up and speak to everyone about the temperature change and the thunderstorm activity as a result of that?
For the record, Ed James with the Carson Water Subconservancy District. And I first want to explain there are two things we are looking at here. One is the Carson City water supply, which you guys have said, your staff has done a great job over the years of building a supply. You're the envy of a lot of entities around here because of the planning that's gone on in the past. So that's why your situation is better off than a lot of others. Talk about groundwater resources. We're not like California where they've been mining their groundwater basins. most of your groundwater is based on a kind of what they call perennial yield that's recharged year after year, and you're not mining it. If you were mining your groundwater basin significantly, that would be a real problem. And that's what we're seeing in California, where the water tables have dropped hundreds of feet because they have not had limitations on that. The other one, though, is the watershed as a whole, and that's an issue you're dealing with. If you look at the watershed as a whole, the ranching community, the farmers, the wildlife, they are going to see an impact this year. The river is at record lows. We haven't seen this. As I talked to one group, if you look at your life, your parents' life, and your grandparents' life, you've never seen a situation like this before in the Carson. So we have two situations you have to be aware of, and that's why when you look at the river itself, we do have issues. But in Carson City, because of the past planning, your situation's in really good shape. Now, to get into the other issue, we're in a major drought, but we could be dealing with some flooding this summer too. A lot of times when you have really dry periods like this, you get the monsoons that come in, and we could actually see a lot of flash flooding this summer. We saw that last summer in areas around. So again, it's being aware of what Mother Nature provides us, and you look back at historic data, you'll see that sometimes when you have really dry conditions like this and then the monsoons can come in, a lot of times we don't get them that big, but if we do get big ones here, we can actually see a lot of flash flooding. But if we have a flash flood, it doesn't really help our water supply. So it's a balancing act you have to look at, but I give your credit to your staff in Carson City that they have done a very good job over the years, and I've worked with a lot of different water entities, and you're probably one of the better shapes here. But again, that does not mean you can waste water. And I think the mayor talked about, are we seeing a trend, a change? And if this drought continues, and we're not talking just 4 years or 20 years, but longer, you may have to reevaluate your water supply in the future because it may not be as there as it was today. But as today, where you stand, you're in very good shape.
Thanks, Ed. Well said. Well said. Okay, anybody else? We'll go on. Tommy, one more time. Come on up.
So if I understand what Ed James just said, even if the drought continues for another 20 years as it is, we won't have any big problems. We won't have to take drastic measures.
I don't think he said that. I think he said that we're in better shape than our surrounding counties because of the planning. But, you know, these things require constant monitoring, and so, you know, we'll just take it day by day, summer by summer, and day by day. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're right. And I mean, I use the word prudence. I had in the back of my mind conservation. That's what we're asking people to do. And by prudence, I mean prudent use of water. Conserve what you conserve if we can. That's what we're supposed to do. And we should do that daily anyway.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay. Okay.
Thanks, Tommy. All right. Anybody? Comment from the board.
I just, listening to the conversation this afternoon, it just occurs to me that we've talked a lot about the water planning over the last 30 years, and especially the strides that Dorothy Palmer was able to make, because she was able to analyze the situation, recommend action, and somebody took action. And I think that that's the situation that we find ourselves in today with our effluent. And I think that we need to challenge ourselves as a board to make that a priority and to step up and work with staff to find the solution and to implement the solution and make that one of our top priorities, so that 30 years from now, whoever is sitting on the board at that time can look back and say, you know, those guys got it right, and we should thank them.
Okay. Anybody else? We've had a lot of public comment, but this is the time. We'll move off this. I want to thank you guys for a good brief. I'm sure that you'll be back when, keep your eye on things. We're now in concluding public comment. Anybody? Hi, Morris. Come on up.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Board. For the record, Morris White. I want to bring to your attention AB 190. That is the Public Employees Retirement System Destruction Act by Randy Kerner. And I say that because I do believe that it will indeed do just that. Yesterday at the legislature, there was a 4.5-hour hearing on this bill. Most of us involved with this situation pretty much figured that that bill was dead, that it was going nowhere. But as the outcome of yesterday's hearing, I believe it probably has some traction at this point. Several entities testified that they will be severely impacted cost-wise if AB 190 goes forward. And I would ask this board that you start taking a look at AB 190 and see what the impact might be to this community as well.
It's a good idea, and I think, the other side of that coin is that, as I mentioned in past board meetings, the Government Accounting Standards Board is now going to mandate that we show the liability side of our benefits in our balance sheet. So that's the other side of this. So I'd ask you, when these things happen, like what we're doing on the Kerner matter on AB, is it AB 190? 190.
190, yes, sir.
Those costs, we'll look at the cost that it could be here. But I'd ask you, Morris, when we go through this, when you see the next balance sheet and when we show the accrued liability that our community is responsible for on PERS, just help us work through what ramifications, if any, that might make, because that has severe ramifications to us as well.
Currently, it looks like there is about an $800 million fiscal note on that particular bill. Mr. Kerner claims that that's all-inclusive of what it will cost not only the state, but all of the individual entities around the state that are involved with PERS. However, several of the PERS entities that testified claim that that's not even going to be close to covering what's going to happen.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Morris. Okay.
Can I ask
Jim,
a follow-up question? No problem. Is this something Mary Walker's following for us? Is she going to have input on it?
Yeah, I appreciate Mr. White bringing this up, and I was remiss for not hitting AB 190 in my update. The city did, along with the other members of our four-county coalition, take a position opposing this bill. It would bring in a hybrid system. It would increase the cost, and it would be detrimental both from our position as the city employer as well as for the individual city employee.
And I appreciate that, but I would go further and urge you to become very active in opposing this. And whether, that's strictly my opinion of what I see happening with this bill. But I think it's time to get very active in the legislative building opposing this. Thank you.
Thanks, Morris. All right. Any further public comment? Anybody? It's 4 o'clock or about. Are we ready? It's been a long day, board, but it's been an informative board. And let me just say, this board made a difficult day a lot easier by how it conducts business. So that's my concluding comment and public comment. So unless there's anything else to come before the board, we're adjourned.